Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I think everybody knows who I am, I hope. I want to thank you for coming. We're very fortunate not to have snow. And I just want to say that this is the kind of event that this department stands for. Intermedia, transmedia, cross-media, lens and screen arts, everything that idea and expression and technology and intention and imagination brings to the world of creativity. And I'm very happy to have James Nares and Amy Taubin, who are two wonderful people and creative talents. And we're going to proceed from here and thank everybody who helped to produce this. Thank you.
Blue, red, yellow, red, blue, blue, red, blue, yellow, red, yellow, red, blue, yellow, blue, blue, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, yellow, red, blue, yellow, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, blue, red, bread, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, red, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, yellow, red, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, yellow, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, red, blue, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red.
Oh dear. So the voice that you heard on the soundtrack of Primary Function is that of James Nares, a visual artist who also plays a mean guitar. For nearly 2 decades, Nares was largely known as the maker of lush, lyrical, single-stroke paintings, until Street, his slow-motion digital video installation, mesmerized viewers at the Museum of Modern Art in 2012. It may be his most elaborate movie, but it was hardly his first. Ever since he arrived in New York from London in 1973, spending his first few months in the city as a student, undergraduate student in the Fine Arts Department of the School of Visual Arts, some of the pieces he made here are still notorious. He has been making films, videos, photographs, and performances. For 40 years, his work has been both obsessive and wide-ranging. He has deployed a dozen or so eidetic images and formal strategies across many media, moving associatively, even dialectically, from one to the other, as he explores the opposition between movement and stillness, ritual and improvisation, interior and exterior, control and abandon. The signature of his work is line as journey, drawn in space or time, involving risk and endurance, resulting in work that is equally kinetic and conceptual. Because I don't like suspense, I'm going to tell you the structure of what we're going to do here now. First, James is going to come up, and he's going to talk his way through a lot of still images and some moving ones. And then he and I are going to have a conversation, which we will then open up to questions from you. So please welcome James Nares.
Thank you, Amy. That was a lovely introduction, Charles. It's really nice to be here. I went to school here for a couple of semesters a long time ago, and a couple of the pieces I made are in this presentation. It's true that my paintings are the thing that people know most about my work, but there's a whole kind of trajectory of my career and life that lead up to these paintings and beyond, I think, now. Sorry about this. These are a couple of my one brushstroke paintings. Many of the things that I explore in the paintings you can find in their infancy in the earlier work. For example, right before I moved to New York, I did this piece where I embossed the imprint of the United States East Coast, which is where I was going, onto my wrist, which has there's a touch of a violent act in there. There's also a kind of dedication to what I was going to do with my future. And I think it was Amy who pointed out that the line kind of resembles the paintings in a way of much later. This is another piece from, actually this was 1973, just before I moved, Red-Handed, which it's a sort of literal rendition of an expression, and I think I'm sort of implicating myself in something. This is a video I made, which did just recently play at the Modern. The other one played at the Met. This played at the Modern, and it was a kind of like a caveman chess or something. It was two people with stones on a tile floor, and the rules were you had to move keep the rhythm going. And it made a lovely click, click, clack sound as we played the game. And you had to move 2 stones at a time, but not put them on the same squares that someone had just taken theirs off. It was a very simple game, but is kind of compelling and has a beautiful ending to it too, which I'll not spoil for you. This is another early piece. I had a job pulling nails out of somebody's ceiling, and I realized that depending on how I pulled the nail, it shaped the old nail. So I took them home and I made an arrangement out of them. But it was a gesture of sort that was controlling this piece of metal. There's something very obsessive about this piece. It took a long time to make that perfect circle and arrange things. It's not something that I do instinctively. These are some early photographic pieces using my hands. They're pretty. These are very old negatives. I found a lot of this stuff in boxes, and this had been through a flood and God knows what, and had the old glassine envelope stuck to it. So they're degraded, but not in a way that bothers me, really. This was a video that, from the same time, where I was using my hands in rhythmic ways to make these kind of invisible structures. Just a collection of hand movements. I called it hand notes. This is something I did in the sculpture department here when I first arrived. My teacher, who I loved, I hadn't realized that you have to sign up for classes when you come to the States. I thought I'd just be told what to do. So I showed up and waited to be told what to do, and someone said, you have to choose your class. And of course, all the people I was interested in had long since filled their slots, and so I took what was left. But I was lucky to have this guy, Richard Van Buren, who was a sculptor, and he asked me to do something. So I made this, and I showed up in the morning, and when he came in, I was up there on the wall with a friend, and he was like, "Wow, oh man, this is great! Oh wow!" He said, and then it was like a critique time, and he said, "Okay, fantastic, you can come down now." And of course we just stayed there. And he went, "Oh man, oh wow!" He was that kind of guy, a really good guy. I used to play. He had a bunch of musicians, including Larry Rivers on saxophone. We used to jam. This is also in the sculpture department here. And on the left, a imaginary, I call it shelf stack at speed. A kind of marriage of stasis and motion. This was a piece I did where it's called Roof, and the image is of what appears to be me and my disembodied head moving around the city, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, looking up, looking down into the street, and these are some of the stills. It was a kind of a grueling experience to shoot this, and it shows, I think, middle number 3, you can see that I'm pushing it to the limit a bit. Physically, it was difficult, and that's why I had a plank of wood around my neck. I don't know if you remember those old video cameras. I hope there's somebody here that remembers them. They were heavy, and I had the camera on one end of this thing, and then the Portapack itself. This was the first really available video to artists. Half-inch, reel-to-reel, you loaded it up like a tape recorder, and it weighed a ton. Roof, it's full of grunts and moans, and the soundtrack has all the trucks hitting their horns and everything. This I called minimal pro motion. And it was like a kind of sandwich board that I walked around the neighborhood with for a couple of hours. I guess I do come out of a minimalist route somewhere. And a lot of these early pieces are really static, but there's motion in there wanting to come out. At this point, I was able to walk around with this thing on. This was another one, to mount my bicycle up on the wall high and mount it in a way that I could pedal furiously and not go anywhere. This is called going nowhere. I never did it. I wish I had. And the idea was to just spend the day up on the wall, bicycling like crazy, going nowhere. This was a piece I did. I think it's a riff on that Taxi Driver, where De Niro is going, "You looking at me?" or "You talking to me?" Like, and I did that with one hand on the stop-start on the camera, and the camera facing me, so I could turn to the camera and deliver like abrupt, aggressive messages. I liked it because the one top left reminds me of isn't there a self-portrait by Delacroix or something, where he's looking like that at the? Am I right? I think I am right. Not that I'm trying to compare myself to Delacroix. This was a film called Block, and I filmed a friend of mine with his hand on the wall, walking up the length of one city block. And I filmed it at 5 frames a second, and then projected it at 5 frames a second. So it's in real time, but it has that kind of stop motion thing. It's the same way they shot a film on the moon, I think, to conserve film. And it looks great. So the impression one has from this film is that the arm is almost static, and that the wall is passing by in a series of tableau, or like still frames. That was the film I was it meant a lot to me. Do you know Richard Serra, Hand Catching Lead? I think I'd been watching that a bit too much, but I'd made this my own too by then, I think. This was another one playing catch with a block of steel. And that's pretty self-explanatory. We got pretty good at it. On top left, you can see that my partner is off camera, but occasionally you'd see his hand come into the frame, releasing this metal bar. And we got pretty good at doing it. At some point in the film, it hits me, which adds a moment of drama to an otherwise very repetitive event. But it does, there's a lot, in these early films and in my work as a whole, there's repetition, learning through repetition, doing things over and over and over again. Rhythm, that's the way I played guitar, rhythm. There's something about rhythm that it's infectious, and it pulls you in. It implies a kind of journey also. This was something I did. I made these poles of wood that were the same height as myself. And I did this sort of fake martial arts, dance, baton twirling thing. And I got pretty good at it. And then the art object was the pole all smashed up. Once they got so smashed up, I would get splinters. I put it aside and used the next one. So I made a collection of those, and I put them on the wall like a pool cue in a pool room, which is a game that's dear to my heart. Actually, 3-cushion billiards is the one that is really dear to my heart, if anyone's interested in that. Here's a video of me, again on that half-inch video Portapack, doing this thing. I made lots of things with that camera because it was just so inviting. It was so exciting to film something and be able to see it immediately. It was unlike anything I'd ever done, and it's funny to me because my kids, they know themselves so well from seeing themselves on video. It's be unthinkable to them to not. And, times change, I guess. This is when I was doing some carpentry jobs, and I learned this trick with my hammer. When I was working away, I just throw it up and spin it with my thumb, and the hammer would go round and round in circles and clunk, and the idea was to catch it at just the moment when it was right to use again, like not upside down or anything. And I got pretty good at this, and I filmed it. The film is exactly this. The hand disappears, it comes back. It disappears, it comes back. And then I increased the frame rate over 3 steps. And by the end, it's going in slow motion, so you can really see what I'm doing clearly. This is another film that degraded from being left in a box somewhere, but I kind of like those scratches and blotches. This was a piece, I made 2. One was called Sledge Hammering Man, and the other was called Rotating Man. And I think if the idea was to project these things very small on the wall with maybe a big sound of the thing hitting its, I don't seem to be able to get it going. I animated this little thing to show you. Oh. Well, next time. Oh, there we go. Just like 8 frames. Click, 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 click. Repetitive, round and round. This is the first of a number of, on the left it's a short Super 8 film where I'm making a freehand circle. And in this one I'm carving it directly into the wall. And it's shot through a sheet of plastic to keep all the dust. I think my bed was down in the corner here or something, so I was trying to keep the dust out, but it gives it this strange atmospheric quality. On the right is freehand circle. I called it Giotto Circle after the painter Giotto's efforts to impress his patron or potential patron with his skills by drawing a perfect circle. On the right, it's on a wall with a big magic marker or something. These are some that I just carved loosely into the wall of the studio. That's a video at the Queen's Museum I did one. That was nice because I watched groups of school children coming out, and they were all doing this. Whole groups of kids trying to do circles. It was very nice. This is a little thing that I made to make giant circles freehand. And I just left these around the city in places, a little bit like those crop circles that just appear out of nowhere, these sort of larger than life-sized circles ground into the wall. And that's the machine, the 2 ends extended. And I could do, I think that's about the largest I could do it. This was another thing I did, was to cast these concrete balls and put them in the elevator and roll them down and out into the street. This is the days when you could do anything you wanted. I don't think it's like that anymore. This was all in Tribeca, which is where we lived, and we were the only people who lived there, it seemed. That's changed. But I was leaving these concrete balls, I think, as the kind of like a reminder or an antidote to all the rising towers and buildings of New York City. It was like clunk down to earth, and a little sort of celebration of the force that actually keeps those things standing tall. Here are a couple of others, abandoned in the street. I never knew what happened to them. They'd stay there for a couple of days and then they'd be gone. I couldn't figure out who would take an enormous concrete ball. but maybe somebody liked them more than me. This was a film where I rolled a concrete ball down the old on-off ramp to the West Side Highway. It was a long ramp, maybe 300 yards long or something, and I just rolled the ball down 3 times, and it crashed into something, and the soundtrack is this sort of gathering storm of the concrete rolling, and the feet are running alongside. I had a sound guy and myself, and the feet get quicker and quicker, and they get in step, so it's this thunderous kind of sound. And the thing gets airborne, like you can see here are some stills. It's airborne. I can't think of a better word than that. These are some drawings I made by taking one of my concrete balls and attaching a piece of acetate and then just spinning it on the studio floor. So these are little scratches that are just made from bits of grit and stuff on the floor. And I made a bunch of them changing the center of gravity each time because it makes it look like there's a modeling, like there's a light source or something. And it gave them a body, like a solidity. But I just love those little marks. This is something that also reappears throughout my work. These are, I call chrono photographs, time photographs, and they're taken with a 4x5 camera in a dark room with a strobe light flashing. And these were of a little pendulum just swinging in the studio with a strobe light, and I kept the shutter open. And it makes these beautiful impressions of something like arrested in motion. Some of them have incredibly intricate little double spirals within spirals as they get closer to their halting point. It's a couple more of those. These are stills from a film of the same pendulum, and proof, if you look closely, that I once smoked cigarettes. The film is also 5 frames a second, so the pendulum is going click, 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 and the movement begins to sort of disintegrate. You can't tell which way it's going or how fast. This was the first pendulum that I strung up in the street, and that was followed by a larger one. This is a few frames from the film superimposed, and if all goes according to plan, I'm going to show you a couple of clips from the film. This is the only color photo of it. It was green, copper. It was a flotation tank from one of those sprinkler system reservoirs that are on the roof of every building. This film, I'm very happy to have it because I thought it was lost, and this is only a print, but it's a good print. So somewhere out there in the world is the original. I just chose a couple of clips, and hopefully we need some sound. sound is made by attaching a microphone to a harmonic point on the wire that's holding the thing. And it gives this creaking like the rigging of an old ship or something. And that's the only sound. There's no room tone, so it's a very interior kind of sound, because that's all there is. It's like you're inside a... Now, I wrote very careful notes on exactly where to go, and then left them behind. So I'm going to have to figure this one out. I basically just set this thing in motion and then filmed it. Yes. 1976. I like that running through, looking at the thing through the slats, because it's a little analogy for film. The moving image is basically just a series of still images. And then at the very end, like towards the end of the movie, I attached it to the pendulum itself. And let's see how this goes. Pendulum. Oh, you don't have to, thanks. I dropped my thing. Maybe you should reserve any applause until I figured out how to get this thing right, because
How much did it weigh?
it was heavy. It was actually a copper, it was a thin copper sphere filled with water, which was the only way I could move it around. It was heavy, but I've always loved the fact that it was a fluid inside, and it looked so menacing and solid, like if, it would really knock something down if it hit it. But actually, if it hit something, it would be the one to break, probably. Bear with me. There you go. And we're back. This was a performance I did where I took something very simple and ridiculous, like throwing a stone, and I broke it down into every minute part of what it takes to throw a stone. This was a way of throwing a stone that I learned from the kids in Ireland, where I spent my summers growing up. And this is kind of an underarm throw, and you can make a flat stone, go for miles. But I broke it down to the point of the ridiculous, and I illustrated the performance with these pictures, like this is the way you hold it. This was a little miniature frisbee that I made. I had a machine shop make. This kind of Muybridge-looking thing is also me, like breaking it down into the little movements. This appears later also in the work. Sequential images. And this is like a long exposure where I'm just going through this motion. This also appears, that has the quality of one of the paintings. It's a gesture holding a light bulb and just doing the movement. These are Polaroids, and the exposure was just as long as the Polaroid it took for the Polaroid to get an image. I started to control that more later on. But this is obviously once on the left and 4 or 5 times on the right. Then everything changed. I thought, to hell with this. It was like 1977, and the only important thing that seemed to be happening was happening in music. So I picked up a guitar and was in a band. I was in a couple of bands. The first one was the Contortions with James White, and my signature thing was this red X that I wore. And I made these little cardboard red X paintings. That's the band, like backstage at Max's or somewhere. Another band shot. I had to put that in. I'm sorry. The car is so good. Our sound was like we did to funk what punk did to 3-chord rock and roll. It was like a loud, abrasive punk funk. And for one summer there, we were pretty hot, though I say so myself. We were making really interesting music, but nothing lasts forever. These are the paintings I was making at that time in my little apartment, taking cardboard off the street. The red X. These are red axes. I did the red X's, I did the red axes. The guitar itself, the object, I guess, is important to me. Then I would turn them into these large black and white photographic enlargements and then stain them with ink and just tape them onto the wall. I lost most of those in a fire. This was a painting. This was actually a little later. This was when that Grandmaster Flash song, The Message, came out. And that seemed to be a very important moment. It was the first really big crossover hit like that. And I made these paintings on steel shelving. I took a couple of record albums, if you remember those, and just stuck them into the wet enamel. And I made a couple of these. I was always very fond of this one. That's Grandmaster 1, and that was Grandmaster 2. This was another band called the Del Byzantines, with Phil Klein here and Jim Jarmusch there. This was right before he started making Stranger Than Paradise. And Phil Klein's a great composer. He does that thing, Unsilent Night, where people walk around the city with boomboxes playing pre-recorded tapes. He was the most musically inclined of all of us. I believe that's me on the left, looking kind of glum. Revisiting the freehand circle, but with household paint. was from a whole series of images I called Against Everything. It was a very nihilistic kind of time. And these were against everything, particularly people like this, who were on the street. And I filmed them in my next film, which was called Suicide? No, Murder. And it was a riff on the Bader-Meinhof gang, who had been found, I think Andreas Bader, they found them dead in their cell. And there was this whole controversy about whether they'd killed themselves or whether they were killed. And I referenced that, but it was more, I was internalizing the idea of suicide, no murder. It was a difficult time in my life, and I kind of presented it as a choice between suicide or taking an action, something like that. And this film is a travelogue, and this was on a demonstration going through the streets of London, through the National Front, they call themselves, these neo-Nazis. The title is from this that was written on the wall somewhere, Notting Hill Gate. These are some stills from the film. There was a lot of I visited my family, so there's a kind of family reference and then a larger reference, and you can see these thugs on the street with sticks. This was a film I shot at the same time, where I put the Super 8 camera on a tripod in front of the television and just did short bursts of filming whenever a head appeared. And so the film itself is a collage of moments cut off, truncated moments. And it was like taking control of the airwaves in a way and redoing conversations and looking at all the different kinds of people that one finds in the world. And that really morphed when I came back to New York into this performance. That's the announcement card on the left, where I was doing my best to look as mean as I possibly could. And that's the press release that I wrote for it, which has some good moments, I have to say. It starts off like I'm writing about somebody else, like Nares does this and Nares does that. And towards the end it gets like, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. It sort of shifts the... and here's a photo of me doing it. I was in a dark room with just a television hanging from the ceiling facing me. Nobody could see the television, and nobody could hear the television. And I could do both. And I was lit by the television, that flickering light, all that sort of colorful light, and I relayed these little snippets. I had a remote channel changer, and it was like a collage of snippets of conversations. And so it was like another version of what I was thinking about in that short film. Then I made this film, Rome 78, where I dressed everybody up in Roman outfits. All my friends had a cast of thousands. The Caesar character, it seemed that what was happening in New York at that time was not unlike what happened in Rome at the time of its decline. And it seemed like a natural movie to make. It was my only real attempt at a narrative film. And the narrative is not the thing that holds, it's not the glue that holds this together. It's like a series of little vignettes, some scripted, some not. But David McDermott, who is now known as a painter more, played the Caesar character, and the film it has its moments. It's just a little bit more than a toga romp kind of thing. But it has its moments. And I shot any place that looked classical, like that was the old Central Park Zoo where you could get in there and talk to the lions, and that's Grant's tomb up on the left in Central Park. oh, here I am doing a shot, and Eric Mitchell on the right, who I opened a cinema with. I think it was the first video movie theater on St. Mark's Place, and we had one of those Advent TV screens that were impossible to see anything on unless you were sitting right in front, right in the middle. So like one person in an audience could actually see what you were showing. But I like this because there's Eric being himself, and here he is a moment later shooting his scene. It's a comedy with a sort of dark edge. Then I wanted to do something that was more sort of straightforwardly political, and I met this guy who was an IRA bomb maker, and he was on the run in New York. And he was a very compelling character with quite a story, and I made a film that was a portrait of him. And these are some stills from that film, video actually. Funny enough, when I did a little retrospective of films a couple of years ago at the Anthology Film Archives, I watched most of them, but this was the one that affected me most. It looked really good. Then more cardboard paintings. Here I would take a big sheet of cardboard and slice it up, paint it with household enamel, and glue it back together. These were paintings on cardboard. It was so plentiful. Still is. Then this film, Waiting for the Wind, which shows me as the character tossing and turning on a bed on a hot summer evening or something, sweaty, and then suddenly a wind comes out of nowhere and starts to destroy the room, and it becomes this tornado inside the apartment. And I got to shoot that because I was being kicked out of this place, I thought very unfairly, so I would destroy it. World Trade Center, looking sweet. That's the script for Waiting for the Wind. Then I started doing more representational paintings. These were some Egyptian works that I made after a trip to Egypt. But they're all painted, you know, they're images from the interior, from the mind. I did them after I came back. You can see that the brushstroke is possibly the most important thing going on here for me. And then it turns into this kind of metaphysical period. And I would do drawings and then make objects, as you can see here. I call this samurai Walkman. I'd seen this show of Japanese warriors, their helmets, and this tuning fork chromosomes. Little pages from my notebooks that are full of kind of overflow of ideas. On the left side, you can see this face that's made up of lines, like a map or something, and that turned into these sculptures where I carved up plaster. That's like a Venus. This was a writer. I turned it into a book and a hand. It was kind of like a primitive CAT scan or something. And then I started making these lenses, and I took a functional object and rendered it useless by making it completely opaque. It kind of goes back to the stone throwing thing of making something, you know, ridiculous in a way, but hopefully revealing something else about it. They're like objects of transformation. They transform light. I made airfoils too. But I made these stacks of lenses. I call them lenses. They kind of look like the paintings too, in these long, thin paintings I make. These are lenses that I made out of water, Polaroids. And I would take a form, like a shallow plexiglass foam, and I would hold that in one hand and the camera in the other and just pull it away, like pulling away the tablecloth and leaving everything on the table. But this left, for a moment, this beautiful lens shape in midair. Some more of those. This I call daily torture, and it was made by dripping water over a period of time, like that Chinese water torture. And I was kind of fed up with the news, and this was my thought made manifest, or feelings made manifest about that. Here you see a drop actually going right there as it hits the center of the newspaper. I like that it kind of references those concrete balls in a way. Some early gestural, simple works on paper. A large painting. This is where I started making my own brushes because I couldn't buy them. Big brushes for big paintings. And then single lines. Although this is made in a series of connected lines, but like this, repetition. And then, that's kind of a nice one. Then these are made with lights. I took light bulbs and painted them black, and then carved different shapes in the face of the light bulb. In this instance, it's just a straight line. So I can kind of mimic and then I had an on-off switch in this hand. Same thing as I did before with that stone throw. On-off switch, I could do a movement, on, off, on, off, on, off, and build up these images on a blank, on a 4x5 negative with the shutter open, so it just slowly built up the image. Here are some other ones. The one on the right is a circle, and it makes these tubes that you can't see so clearly here. More of the same. I like the idea of painting in space and really making it like a dance. Some more paintings where I broke down the movements into little different, like accumulations of different movements. And then, these were the first one movement, one brushstroke paintings I made. And I'm particularly fond of them still. This one also. Here are some of my brushes. I would buy them if I could. I have hundreds of brushes in various stages of reappropriation, and I'll take the handle off that one, stick it on there. You can see I took my stepson's fencing handle, bottom right. It's a pistol grip for a foil. It makes a great handle. It's so kind of nuanced. And the one, you see, it's like a yellow down here at the bottom right. It's a yellow thing with looks like horns in metal. That's the handle. But these, you can see, like there are hammer handles and fishing rods and pool cues up here on the top left. I make them out of anything. And here you see this system I devised. It was very important to me with the paintings to not lose the kind of body memory of the movement I was trying to make. And I would make a one movement image, and if I didn't like it, I would take it off with rags and turpentine and on my hands and knees and scrub it down. And that slowly evolved into this system where I can make a brush stroke and erase it instantly if I want to. And it comes off without any sign of ever having been there. And you can see here I'm making the brushstroke at the top and erasing it as I do with a squeegee at the bottom. Paint comes off, it goes back in the bucket and up this end of the table. So I'm using the same paint over and over. It's very cyclical, repetitive. I keep doing the brushstroke over and over until I get it just right. I can't go in, you know, if it's great except for the very end, I'll take the whole thing off. I can't go, again, a circle brushstroke.
What type of surface is it on?
The paintings are on linen, which are primed and then covered with a transparent film, excuse me, a transparent film that's very tough so that I can squeegee across it. And it's like squeegeeing across a piece of glass or something. The paint, I put wax in it so that when it goes down, it doesn't move. It's, I want the paintings to look like they're sort of blown onto the canvas. I have to paint horizontally in order to achieve that because the paint has to be quite fluid. But when it's finished, it'll dry and I put it on the wall. I don't like any drips that give an orientation for the painting. These are works on paper, big paper works. All one movement. Sometimes, you know, the brushstroke will break into separate parts, but it's always one movement. This is a big painting. I started making them in separate panels and putting them together. This is like 10 feet tall and 8 feet wide, I think. Which is a big painting for me. And then here's a video which follows this quite obviously. And it's shot at high speed. So the thing it's moving very slowly and the ribbon is going through these movements. And it's making this thread through space. And I filmed it actually this way up and showed it like this, so the hand is kind of coming out of heaven, and then I show it backwards, so the hand is following the ribbon instead of making it go. But it's very difficult to tell when you look at it. Something just seems off. This was a short film I made, making fake, pretend weather patterns in the bed sheets, and the film is like 10 seconds. Change it, another 10 seconds, change it, and the light was slowly fading, so that it has this beautiful, slow, natural fade to darkness. In the end, it begins to get kind of stormy, like there's a hurricane about to blow. This was a high-speed film I did, meaning ultra-slow motion, where I'm moving a cloth around and making these calligraphic kind of forms. And then these are paintings that relate pretty clearly, I think. It's a detail of here are some works on paper. These are like those earlier photographs with the stone throw. These are chronophotographs where I'm moving in a dark room with a flashing light, a stroboscopic light, and creating forms, maybe revealing things that you can't see. It's difficult to, you can sort of get an idea of these hand claps and things. I made thousands of these. This is a hand in motion. Again, making a fist. Hand clapping arm clapping, running naked through the studio. Somebody has to do it. My kids thought I was crazy. Papa, what are you doing? Sometimes they look like a frieze of soldiers or something, and carved in stone. And then these are works on paper made with a feather brush, and they're kind of duplicating the same movements from the chronophotographs. Repetition, rhythm. 3 of those, 4 of those. This was a film called Riding with Michaud, and I filmed it on the train going up the Hudson River or coming back down to the city at sunset, and the light in the river made this beautiful black and white kind of vision. And filming it as I did at a slow frame rate, this was like 7 frames a second, the image comes like, again, a series of stills, like my block movie, with the hand going down the length of the city block. And this becomes it's kind of a visionary film that occasionally brings you back to reality when you go through a tunnel, as you can see top left. And I call it Riding with Michaud because it reminds me so much of one of Henri Michaud's ink drawings on the left, and a still from the film on the right. And I'm particularly fond of Henri Michaud. This is a film called Globe, where I made a lens out of a transparent glass sphere, and sandwiched it between two pieces of plexiglass, and then put that in a little light box on front of the camera, and then did this kind of investigation of the surface of the city. But it has this strange illusion that the ball, as I move, that it's rolling, but that it's sucking up everything around it. And Phil Klein, who was in the Del Byzantines, did a soundtrack for this, which was like a little phrase of Bach that he extended. It was just beautiful. Here you can see a number of stills from the film. Just this wandering globe. Some works on paper that I make using, they're called interference colors, and they don't have any pigment. They all look white, and each pigment refracts a different wavelength of light. So the blue refracts everything in the spectrum except blue. If you mix them all together, instead of getting like brown mud color like you do with regular paints, it makes white. So it's like painting with light in a way. And they change. As you walk around, the colors change. Here's one. You can see I've taken a photo from different angles, and you can see the color shifts are quite dramatic. It kind of dematerializes the painting in a way that I like. This is one of the larger paintings. I think it's about 25 feet long, one of the largest I've made. This is called Paper Factory, because that's where I shot it. And I had friends each take one of these lengths of pipe. Each one, if you threw it down, had a different note. And we just had this pipe throwing party up against the walls and bouncing off the walls and floor in this building. And then I edited it by taking small clips and repeating them. So it animates these things, and it becomes like I called them video music. which is what they are. And then I made this film recently, Street, that got a lot of attention, and it played in a number of places now. And I think I have a clip. I was going to show the very beginning of Street. These are some stills from the film. And the film is pretty self-explanatory. The camera never stops moving throughout the whole film. It's this long, slow trajectory through the city. I'll play that after this. These are some road paintings, I call them, made with one of those road painting machines. Here I am making them. It seemed like I'd always wanted to make some road paintings, and after Street got some attention, I thought, well, now's the time. If I'm ever going to do it, this is the time. So I made these road paintings, which is this very kind of dangerously hot paint that goes down, and then I sprinkle little glass spheres into it, and it has this. It reflects, and like the way the white lines on the street do when you're driving through the night. So they have this uncanny glow. These are big paintings too. I was thinking of doing some paintings in the street while I was about it, maybe a couple of miles long. This is an all-white one. And just to finish, the very last thing I've been doing recently is making, I call them speed drawings. And on these, the drawing is moving and I'm standing still. I made a large cylindrical thing that spins round and round, and I go into it with pencils and ink and things in the way that a machinist would go into a lathe. And so I'm just standing there, and this is one of those. And I think that's it. I was going to show quickly a clip from Street, which I'm hoping has downloaded. If not, I have a little drive here I can play it from. And then we'll end. If we ever get there. Yes. I hope this works. This camera was like super high resolution, and it looks beautiful. But the problem is that the information from each, from each individual frame is so vast that I've had technical problems, but hopefully this won't be one of those times. Where is this? I'm a little slow with this. The soundtrack is Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth playing 12-string guitar, and it is, I'm sorry. It's about as full as it gets. Thanks.
That was really wonderful. I mean, I have all those on a little flash drive, so, but
You know them well.
yeah. I guess I'll start from asking you from the end. Every time I look at Street, although the process is very similar to your other work in that there are certain constraints and they have to do with time, and maybe you could talk about that. Nevertheless, the fact that you're just out there with the camera, looking at the outside world rather than inside the studio, and yeah, I wondered what on earth made you do that?
Well, that's a good question. I'd always been fascinated by slow motion, and I'd always loved these films. They're called actuality films. They're also known as phantom films, which I didn't find out until afterwards. And the camera I was shooting with is called the Phantom. But in those films made around the turn of the last century, like 1910 or something, they would just mount a camera onto the front of a trolley car or something and drive through the city, and they would drive through Chicago and then show the film in New York. Thank you. Or there was no attempt to interfere with what was happening or to edit in such a way that you manipulated what was being filmed to kind of suit your preferences. And really, I couldn't think of anyone who did that until Andy Warhol picked up his cameras many years later. But I like to just watch. There's a linear thing that's happening in the film. I had bought a little handheld high-speed camera that was very cheap, and it did kind of a crappy image that grain the size of golf balls. But you could get a sense of it. And I drove around the city with one hand on the wheel and the other out the window. And I realized that something was revealed which fascinated me. And I made up my mind to try and do it in the way that seemed to suit the idea, and make it look really good.
Do you want to tell us about, I think some people know about how you did it. I mean, about the 6-second runs of the camera and syncing that to the moving car. And
well, it was a thing that I got better and better at as we filmed. I filmed it over a period of a week, just driving through Manhattan, up, down, across town, different weathers. And I present the film pretty much in the same sequence that I shot it. There's 2 days that it rained, and there's a raining sequence where I combine those 2 days into one. But aside from that, there was no reason to structure it any other way other than to kind of recreate my movement. And when I asked Thurston to do the soundtrack, he understood immediately, and his guitar wanders freely through his mind in the same way that we wandered through the city. But it's one person. And in a sense, as you watch the film, you become, there's thousands of people in it, but you identify with each one in one way or another. So there's a kind of unifying principle that is there. So I filmed I got a big SUV and took all the seats out of the middle of the whole back of the car. So we had driver's seat and passenger seat, and mounted the camera, which was pretty monstrous size, right in the middle of the car. And I could it was not very maneuverable, so I could either shoot out the left side or the right side. I wanted to shoot in a way that the street became like a theatrical backdrop in a way. So I'm always shooting pretty much perpendicular to the direction of travel. And we had this camera in the car, and the camera is, it's always recording. If the camera is switched on, it's recording. And what you do as the photographer is to latch onto this loop. It's like recording in a loop. And you choose to latch onto that loop after something has happened, or before it's happened, or something in between. You could set the trigger, it's called. So you can trigger the camera at any point you want over this 6-second loop. The frame rate that I was shooting at, which was about 780 frames a second, it gave me 6 seconds of the longest. Like the longest shot I could make would be 6 seconds. So we were driving in order to give the impression of everything, of kind of floating through this city of semi-frozen people. I wanted the car to be traveling, I figured, between about 30 and 40 miles an hour the whole time. So things happened pretty quickly. And if I saw a shot coming up, I got pretty good at it. I had to, anticipate. There was a lot of anticipation. And then just like lightning fast, f-stop, frame, everything else that goes into making a shot. And of course, when you're traveling at speed like that, the light changes very dramatically, especially if you're going like up an avenue past side streets. There'll be a blast of light as you go past the side street. So it was a very finessing kind of thing to get those shots. All in all, I shot 16 hours of footage. That's in the slowed down speed. And I edited it down to 1 hour. Almost half the footage was useless because I hadn't realized that the back focus on the lens was not calibrated right. And after the first day of looking at what I was getting, I thought, wow, this looks great, and I won't check it. And believe me, it's a good idea to check like, whenever you can, because I lost half the stuff I shot I couldn't really use. But there was plenty there to work with. I could, there were some beautiful shots that didn't make it into the film. But yeah, we were like, I felt like the FBI. It's amazing what you can do, with a big camera in a big black SUV with no windows. I got this beautiful shot. I was doing it right at the time of the Occupy Wall Street, and we just cruised right through the Occupy Wall Street, and I got this beautiful shot. Sadly, it wasn't such a great, there wasn't much happening of interest, but nobody told us to stop filming anyway. I did square it with the mayor's office to see if I needed any permits, and they said, nah, just stay away from bridges and tunnels. So that's what I did.
One of the things that I've always noticed about your work, no matter what medium you're working in, is that there is an aspect of performance. I mean, on the one hand, the work is highly conceptual, and that's where the minimalism comes from. But then it's married to this really quite high-risk performance, or performance that involves endurance. And even the paintings where, I mean, sometimes you have an assistant and sometimes you're alone. They're very performative works. I mean, the whole harness, and maybe you can tell people about that.
Yeah, I have various systems of making those paintings. But it's true, I distrust something if it happens too easily. I'm getting better at trusting it. But if there isn't a bit of effort put into it, it seems like there's something wrong. And sometimes I'm working on a painting, and you know, I make a brush stroke, we erase it, put it down, erase it, and sometimes I'll just make something that's just I can't get rid of it. It's so nice after just like 1 or 2 attempts, and I've learned to trust that and make another one.
Right after, the same day? Or do you,
Yeah.
after you finish it, you just stop?
I stop, and then by the beginning of the next day, it's dried enough to see it vertically. But the brushstrokes themselves, I can put them down. You know, making a brushstroke takes a matter of seconds, and erasing it takes a matter of seconds. So it references photographs in that way. It's like short time frames of image, but they're like images of the mind. They're like photographs of the mind. I think I stole that from Malevich or somebody who talked about photographs of the mind. But that's what they are. They even look like photographs, the paintings, because they're very flat. The mixture that I use dries flat, and it has I'm able to do a kind of modeling within the brushstroke that looks photographic.
What do you think about the fact that in the 70s, there was this enormous freedom to work with basically any media, partly because people were having such difficulty painting, I think. And suddenly, that work from the 70s, everyone wants to see, and now the defining media form in the art world really is performance. And that seems to me to come out of the 70s, kind of gone into hibernation and returned.
It's true. Before I came to New York, I was buying and reading American art magazines, and the people who I was most interested in were, people like Vito Acconci and people doing performances and making videos, like Bruce Nauman walking around his studio on one leg. Just great. Nobody ever done that before. Ways of seeing that were fresh. And there was a sense that you could explore for the sake of exploring without necessarily having something to accomplish in mind. And it was very freeing. I'm, funnily enough, finding myself in a period in my life after having focused on the paintings for so long. I now feel a kind of liberation that's coming back with making films again, and I got a few performances up my sleeve. We shall see. But yeah, it's, that was a great time. I'm not particularly nostalgic, because I'm not a particularly nostalgic person, but looking back on those days, there was an incredible range of invention that the people were coming up with.
And also, the first time I became aware of you, I think, was in 77 when you did Desirium Probe, the performance at Joan Jonas's loft and then at the kitchen, and we were on the same series.
Yes.
in the kitchen. But I have no memory of what I did. But I'll never forget Desiree Burrow because it was the great film, the great performance, I think, of that period, and nothing ever like it. And indeed, it was a performance of such extraordinary endurance and simply channeling everything that was on television on every channel. I mean, there was no cable, but you know, all 5 channels or whatever for 4 hours was extraordinary.
I was looking for a ready-made script. I think I wanted to perform, but I didn't. You know, I needed a script, and that's what I came up with. I think you could see it came out of that film and other things that were happening. It seemed to fit the mood. I called it Desirium Probe. It was like a mixture of desire and delirium, so like flirting with madness in public. I don't recommend it.
And yeah, and then I'll just ask you what you make of this. I wrote about Desirium Probe about 2 years ago in Art Forum, I think, and subsequently this young art student from some college in the South, maybe Savannah, called me up and said he wanted to do his thesis recreating this performance. And did I have your number? And did I have any more documentation of this performance? And I said, well, I'll tell James and he can contact you if he wants. But what do you think of that? Of people now, I mean, people are doing it right and left, recreating 70s work.
I don't know. It never seems to be quite. I found that Marina Abramovich's recreations, I don't know, it kind of steals some of the spark out of the original. I understand why, and I understand the about using a performance as a script, but it's not something I would want to do. But it was fascinating to have this guy call up and say, I mean, he was really a fan. He researched it. It was great, and he did it. I think I did a live Skype presence in the place he was doing it. His rendition was pretty different than mine, but I'm sort of on the fence on that one.
Okay.
Although, funny enough, I am thinking about a film that incorporates some of those systems from that performance into it. So stay tuned.
The other thing that you kept mentioning, and I'm not sure that people out here know about it, so I just wanted to clarify. You were very attracted to this camera, the Beaulieu Super 8 camera. Partly, most people use the Beaulieu Super 8 because they wanted to make narrative films, and it could record sync sound. And when James and Eric Mitchell did this crazy theater on St. Mark's Place, which used the first Advent projector, and which I reviewed terribly in the Soho News and said everything looked like garbage or pink soup.
I think Eric Mitchell rubbed you the wrong way, Amy. Like, not the first.
But you did not use the Beaulieu like that. You used the Beaulieu because it had a variable speed motor.
Yes.
And could you talk a little bit about the moving image, and then we'll open it up, the moving image work that you do that you think in terms of speeds, of variable speeds, not real time.
Yes. It is something that, in a sense, the paintings I make are made too fast to be able to see them happening, and they are a representation of an event that happens with all the nuance laid bare. in a way that is similar. Shooting street, I learned a number of things, but one of them was that I was aware that by shooting something at a high frame rate, you were able to see things that the naked eye couldn't see, like, you know, the old Edgerton bullet going through an apple or something. And I knew that that things would be revealed by using this camera. What I wasn't expecting was that things become invented and created in the mind of the person watching, which I guess is true of everything. But in this case, it was driven home to me. It's a moment I've talked about before, but there was this one guy, and I was editing the film in Chinatown, I think, and he's walking along the street looking with his head down, and he looks like he's just the most dejected, sad, tired, worn-out person. And then I watched the film at normal speed, and the guy's just glancing at his shoelaces. And I realized right there that it was kind of a beautiful moment, because I realized that almost everything is half whatever you bring to it. And curiously enough, not thinking of myself as a narrative filmmaker, Street is a film that is a collection of little mini narratives, and except you kind of write the scene yourself. Like you can't be sure what's going through somebody's mind, or you can't be sure what's going on in an interaction between two people, but yet it seems significant. When I made the proposal for this film, I described it as that I was going to drive around filming like this, not looking for moments of obvious dramatic interest, but for little nuances of, you know, little things that were compelling, and that's what I got. Little moments, like a movement of the eyes becomes like a major dramatic event in this film. Things like that.
Why don't we take some questions from out here? Not easy to see you because there's glare, but over here. Yeah.
Hi. Hi.
This has been fascinating. I'm wondering, thinking of 6-second loops, have you experimented with the vine at all?
With what?
The vine?
The vine.
It's sort of like Twitter for video. Sorry.
Oh, you know,
My question was whether James had tried the Vine, which allows you to create 6-second loops with your phone and loop those or do other things.
I know what you're talking about. I didn't know it was called the Vine. I haven't done that. I don't do much social media because I just don't have the time. But I'm very aware of what my kids are doing, and they're always like, "Oh, Papa, you don't come on." It's like, you don't know about, well, you know, this, that, or the other, and they've got their relationship to images is so different from anything that I have. Images are not as special, and they make them, they put them up, and they make the next one and put it up, and then it's just like a constant flow of images. It seems like people are communicating in images, and I think it's amazing. I have seen those little short clips, and maybe I should get a couple up there and make myself known.
I would definitely follow you.
I'll let you know if I figure it out.
Hi, you talked about, right here.
Sorry.
When you were shooting Street, you started to get good at anticipating when something potentially good was going to happen. How did that happen? How did that work?
I think it's a kind of osmosis. Is that the right word? well, you just kind of pick up on you get into the flow of doing this, and you see the possibility of something coming. If I shot it and then decided that I didn't want it, we could look at the shot in real time and decide if there was something there, and then erase it, or not erase it, but not download it. Because every time I did a 6-second shot, it would take about 10 minutes to then offload that information onto a big, drive. So that was another reason to be selective about what I was shooting. I'm very fond, that's why I like film over video too. It's because the moments are more special. It's like people are more focused and they concentrate more if you've only got this amount of time. And we were pretty focused. It was teamwork inside that car, SUV van. It required a kind of orchestration that we got good at.
Your contemporaries around when you made Rome 78 were drawn to genres like
Yes.
Noir and sci-fi, Eric, of course, Amos Poe and Borden and some of the others. What drew you to the sword and sandal epic? Seems to be kind of unusual for
It was unusual.
as a choice.
It does stand slightly apart just through, by virtue of that fact. Like whoever thought of making a Roman epic, on the streets of New York. And I had made friends with Eric and a number of other people who were thinking in terms of narrative films. Vivian Dick, John Lurie made a couple of great films. Kathy Bigelow, yep, she was there. Her and Becky Johnston. I'm sorry, I forgot the question. What drew me to making that kind of film? It was not a natural thing, as I said, that the narrative thread was difficult. You could sort of switch scenes around and it wouldn't make that much difference. It was like vignettes. Eric was a great inspiration because he was the first person that I shot any film with where it was obvious that he was tailoring what was happening in front of the camera to the camera. And he would say, okay, shoot this, and I'm going to sit at a chair here, and I'm going to clean this gun or something. This was his film, Kidnapped. And then he'd sit in the chair at the table, and he'd turn into a really awkward position that looked completely unnatural to me. And I was more of the school of a sort of documentary type of thing, shoot things the way they are. And here was Eric transforming his body so that it conveyed in as concise a way as possible the message he was trying to convey. And that was a big eye-opener for me. Eric was a big inspiration to a lot of people. I remember, you'd be walking down 2nd Avenue and there'd be an awning with light underneath, and he'd say, oh, great, we've got to do a shot here. Look, the lighting's perfect. He was constantly thinking films and thinking narratives and talking about the films that interested him, and then Amos too, who's sort of, I think, the grandfather of that scene, or the godfather. I think Amos was the godfather. He was kind of there before anyone, filming in CBGBs. But I think it was a feeling, there were, if I think of Vivian's films, Vivian Dick with Lydia Lunch sitting in her apartment in a bombed out neighborhood saying, I don't know, there's nothing to do. It's like, it kind of brings up the whole feeling. Nobody had any money, And that's liberating in a way. I wouldn't, want to go back there particularly, but not having anything, then you got nothing to lose. I believe that's a song.
There's a very a movie that's going to come out this month, the new Jim Jarmusch movie, the name of which I'm totally forgetting now. Last Lovers Left Alive.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful movie. I mean, it's a great movie, but it seems to me to be truly a movie about the 70s. And finally, the movie made that's really about that. And of course, they're all vampires, but with a relatively large amount of money, $5 million probably, and very, very, very beautiful and very controlled. But it's odd looking at it now because it could have been a Vivian Dick movie. And at a certain point, although I asked Jim and I said, when Tilda says, "Well, what are we going to do now?" I said, "You had Vivian just running around in your head like for 30 years. And he said, "Oh no, I never thought of that."
He did tell me a funny story about how he came up with the title of the film, which was that he was...
Only Love is Left.
Yes, Only Love is Left Alive. He said that he was location scouting in Morocco. I haven't seen the film, but part of it is shot in Morocco.
Yes.
Tunisia or something? Yeah. He said he was coming back through customs after this location scouting, and the customs people were really on his case. And he was saying, "So, what do you do?" And he said, I'm a filmmaker. I'm here scouting for my film. And I said, "What's the name of the film?" And he went, and he came out with it right there and then. "Last Love is Left on Earth." And the guy said, okay, you must be for real. And they sent him packing, But it was a very spontaneous titling of that film.
I mean, it is a song, but it's a 50s song. But
He's got a pretty good knowledge of music.
someone else out here?
I have a question.
Hey.
First of all, it's delightful to hear you talk about your own work and see all this work. It seems to me that technology plays, and I hate the word technology, a role in everything you've done, to the point where certainly this latest piece, The Street, which I think awed everybody who saw it at the Met, is a pinnacle of using the most available and readily facile technology to get at something that is anecdotal and the essence of the street itself. And I'm just wondering, and I think about your paintbrushes, they're a technology that you're inventing. What you're feeling about the use of technology as an artist and moving forward with it.
I'll use anything personally if it can accomplish something that I'm after. I do, I make my own brushes and I make these funny contraptions. It's not exactly the most advanced technology, but I do jokingly call my studio Nares Lab because it seems like I'm sort of, up to something in there. What's he doing?
And you've done lots of things with altered lenses and...
Yeah, I'm always sort of fooling around with things, trying to customize them, I think. I'm not going to go and use the most high-tech camera there is just for the sake of it. There'll always be a reason to use it, I think, in the things I do. So I'm not adverse to technology. There was this guy who's a friend of Elizabeth's who came up to me during the screening of Street at the Met, and he said, and he works at MIT, and he was saying, "You have to come up and visit us. he's in the Edgerton lab up at MIT, and he's saying, we got this camera up there that'll shoot billions of frames a second. And I don't actually understand how this works, but he says it shoots so fast that you can see light emanating from something before it's happened. He says you can see, it's like you can see around corners because you get the reflected light coming off of an object. And I said, I bet the military are interested in that. And he said, yeah, the military are interested in just about everything we do. But still, that's a mind-boggling concept, and I don't really understand how it works.
As a footnote to that, one of our students a couple of years ago used that camera to photograph a bullet blowing up a camera.
Sort of coming straight at you, or something?
At the camera, it just
Nice.
becomes celestial.
Yes. I think technology is there for a reason, and if it suits your purpose.
I just had a question. I'm over here to your left. Yeah. When you did these pieces like Pendulum or the other piece where you rolled the ball, the big massive cement, did you invite others to be there with you to watch it? Did you think of it as something, or as something just for you? How many people were there? Did you advertise it?
There was a lot of word of mouth. I don't know how anybody got anything together in those days without cell phones and instant messaging and stuff, but somehow we did. And there was like a group of people, and we all kind of knew what the other, what one another were doing, and there's a couple here tonight, Anthony McCall, right there in the thick of it, making movies, and we just kind of, the whole art world seemed a lot smaller in those days. And in a way you sort of could if you didn't know everybody, felt like you could reach out and sort of get to know them or touch them. It's such an enormous thing now in so many different worlds combined. But
I think that very few people knew, say, about those performances, these kind of secret performances you were doing in that garage where you moved the stones around and
yes, I did lots of
these
stuff.
Obsessive performances.
There's a lot of things I did which nobody saw, or I would finish it and throw it in a box. And it's only been in the last 3 or 4 years that I've begun to look at those things and find things that are pretty interesting, like that film Roof at the very beginning. I shot that and I looked at it once and decided that it wasn't really what I'd wanted, and I put it in a box. And it wasn't until I was working with Kelly Spivey at Mercer Media about 4 or 5 years ago, and she showed it to Bill Sierra, and he said, "Wow, this is great." And I said, "Well, maybe you're right. Yeah, maybe it's pretty good." So I don't recommend doing stuff and not showing it to people, because that's how you learn and that's how you get out into the world. But that is a lot of what I did. I don't know why. It was never good enough or something.
Yeah, hey man. It was really just fantastic to experience all this, by the way. So I was just wondering, so your essence or foundation is performance, but you use a lot of different mediums to capture and express that performance. Just wondering if you can, if you have anything to say about the differences in the mediums in terms of pain or pleasure, or, is it like those paintings sound like quite a pleasurable experience, where as something else can be quite a laborious.
I know what you mean. I made the mistake one time of telling Frank Stella that his new work looked like it was really fun to make. And we'd been having a good conversation up until that point. And suddenly he just looked at me, and he turned around and walked off. It's like, it's not supposed to be fun. And I understand why he, reacted in that way. But there is a, you know what it is like when you're making a painting. There's an immediacy. You can make a painting, and there it is. You've made it. It's done. It's in front of you, and then you can go and make another one. If you're making a movie, it takes a lot longer, and you have to get the funding, and then you have to make it happen and get it shown and promote it and do all that. That's when I stopped filming, when I realized that I wasn't really cut out for that. And I started making small films again and not really showing them. You know. But
do you think there's an essence there also, in your work at least, making sure to just keep it small in terms of doing it for not for necessarily just for yourself, but keeping a purity of...
There's something about a kind of intimacy between oneself and the viewer that appeals to me, like the smaller scales, cheap cameras, things that anybody could do. It appeals to me. But then it was fun getting that big Phantom camera and doing that too. You know, I'm not adverse to anything on principle.
But even the way you did that was, the way you used it was...
Yeah, it's true.
We'll just take maybe two more.
Thank you. I have a question about your scripts. You showed some stills of the film where you're shooting...
Waiting for the Wind.
Yes, and you showed a script. And I never thought that you would actually use a script, because it seemed like particularly the pendulum, the ball rolling down the ramp, seems very immediate and very exploratory. And I'm curious about how writing plays a part in your work, and when do you write scripts, and yeah.
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. The ones like the ball going down the ramp, and pendulum too, there was no script. There's a massive accompanying well of drawings and other kinds of material that would go along with pendulum, say. In Rome 78, we were, I would write some dialogue one day, and then we'd pin it up behind a piece of fabric so the person... There's a lot of reading the script in that film, or someone might start off reading the script and then go to hell with it and start doing something else. It was very... But I wanted that. I wanted the film to be a personal interpretation of history, because we do invent our own histories, really, anyway, and to be about what was happening between people. I typecast people, kind of, my friends. And yeah, it is one of the themes, I think, that runs through the things I do. Did that answer the question? Well, the script, yeah.
But I mean, Waiting for the Wind was a slightly more complicated film. It was a film I tried for years to get from James. When I became the film and video curator at the Kitchen in the mid-'80s, I think I would call him every 5 months and say, "Are you sure you lost Waiting for the Wind? We have a 3/4-inch dub here, but it doesn't really play. Don't you have a better copy?" And he'd always say, "Oh no, all this work is lost. I don't have it anymore." And then, miraculously, it was refound in 2006, all of this work.
Curious.
Curious. I always thought it was curious.
Yeah. I knew the films, I hoped the films were somewhere. I just hoped. They couldn't be lost. I really thought that a couple of them were gone, because I moved so much from one, I lived a couple of months here, a couple of months there, carrying boxes around, and I didn't get anything consolidated into storage until much later. So it was a very real possibility. And Pendulum, that we saw a bit of, I still don't have the original film. That was working always from a print. I made one print of the film, and that I have. The original film I don't have, and I know that there's all kinds of beautiful information in like grays and things that you can see that one can no longer see. I think I might know who has it, but I'm not sure.
and this is going to be the last.
Oh, no. So I guess I was wondering more about the relationship between experimentation and I guess what the relationship was with your body of work between like experimentation, your reaction to like what you would get from like a certain medium or from a certain gesture, and like how that would drive the direction of, you know, your work, where you would go with it.
Well, I guess I like to experiment, and I'll let the results of my experiment really dictate the route that I'm going to take. Does that answer it? It's pretty amorphous kind of thing, like, because all art is, hopefully, an experiment of some sort. It's really just an experiment to be yourself sometimes. It's not so easy.
But I do have a sense of what you mean, because it always seemed to me that a lot of the work from, say, around 1974 to through Pendulum, they seem to me to be not really sketches, but there was an idea, and the idea could go this way or that way, and it was a sense of trying things out, and they were sometimes ideas of things rather than full-fledged things, but they always led to something else. And you know, when you show those slides, that's a massive amount of work. I mean, it's like you're working every day doing, oh, this and that and the other, and then it begins to go somewhere.
Well, like the tossing a lump of steel, playing catch with a lead, I call it a steel rod, I call that. I found 3 versions of that film, and I gradually honed it from one to the next to be the film I wanted it to be. And I purposefully ended up shooting on the roof with these receding, kind of exaggerated perspective lines of the roofing tower. There are these lines that put it in a kind of speedway context or something, even though it's only on the roof. And we rehearsed, like we practiced getting good at that. It was something that just started off as a game. And then we got better, I thought, the movie. And then I shot a couple of different versions of it before I realized I wanted to have... That's right, it was the other way around. I was the one throwing, and I was playing catch, but I wanted to switch it around and be the catcher. And so it went through a couple of manifestations before I got there. But it's the same with everything, really.
Thank you so much, James.